Finally, we made it.
Amen. Amen.
The stage made it work, man.
You know, I had to step away for a second. I was like, you know what? Just have a little bit of patience. Walk away for a minute. Breathe. It'll come. All right. So let me welcome you again to the SUWarriors podcast. And today my guest is Tafi the Lion. So let's just start with now let me ask you, Tafi, is that your name?
Yes, yeah, that's my name. And you channeled your inner Bantu because your pronunciations of the phonics there was amazing. As someone who lives in Europe, my names are constantly getting butchered, eh? So that was quite nice. Yeah, so my name's Tafi the Lion, which is basically my first name amalgamated with my last name put together. My grandmother named me Tafi, which is that part, and then the Lionel came from my dad. As I got older, I understood the meaning of the name Lionel, which means young lion. And I believe with anything, with progression, you have to evolve. So then naturally, I've shortened that to Lion, which, as a 40-year-old male, I think I've earned that now.
I know that's right. All right. So, Tafi, you study martial arts. You've been studying martial arts for quite some time right now. What systems have you studied, and tell us a little about your martial arts journey.
Right. I'd have to kind of go way back with some of it.
Okay. Start back from the beginning. That's why we're here today.
So I'm from Zimbabwe originally.
Okay.
And but if anyone knows in regards to Africa, in regards to colonization, what happened there, our peoples lived in a place where there were no borders. So there was the convention. What happened in Europe, you know, they all agreed. The people who were in power, the major powers, who was like United Kingdom, you had Portugal, France, Spain, Italy. Not much stake for Spain in Africa per se, and Germany. And basically, they carved up Africa. They kind of like cut and put borders in place during the colonial times. But predating this, I come from an ancestral lineage. They're called Gore Kore, who were the warrior clan for who we call Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe people are, as you know, Zimbabwe it's a play on that. And I think you kind of see a play of it a little bit in Black Panther, which gives a lot of people from my part of the Southern Hemisphere a bit of pride when you see stuff like Black Panther. There's a bit of play in that in regards to we're part of a warrior kingdom. There was different classes. You have the politicians, you had the farmers, and I literally come down from the bloodline of warriors on my father's paternal side, and quite familiar on my mother's side. She's Soshangani, who was a general for Shaka Zulu, who migrated from KwaZulu-Natal into what they call Gaza in Mozambique. And because of the nature of the type of people they were, they didn't really adhere to borders. They moved, shifted about. And in modern times, where I was born, was what we call Zimbabwe today. So naturally, as part of that lineage that I come from, the whole concept of fighting, manhood, strength is something that is really pushed to the forefront.
Good.
So I was inducted quite early on in boxing at the age of 8. I had
about the same time.
Yeah, I was quite a high energy kid. You know, right. They had to do something with me, you know. And started boxing very early on. Very strong regiment in Africa, as you could imagine. It reminds me, I've seen a documentary in boxing in Cuba, for example, how they make the kids do the drill. So it's very, very, almost reminds me of kung fu in the sense that you can kind of be stuck on one drill for a very, very long time. If you're going to work your jab, you're working your jab. If you're working your movement, that is it. I feel it's very different today in regards to martial arts today, where I think people who pay, it's kind of like the fast food kind of thing. People want to pay and learn as much material as quickly as possible. Whereas that time when I was learning was really, really slow. So I started in boxing. Then later on, the school system in Zimbabwe is based on like a sporting curriculum as well. So you do your academics and you have to have a sport that you do. My older brother, I'm different. I'm like 5'10", but my older brother, my dad and that, they're like 6'3", 6'4". Those are the people on my dad's side of the family. I'm more like the height of people on my mum's side of the family. So the same school I went to with my brothers and my cousins and that, they were all rugby players. And
that's
so
that's a weird smart.
I was expected to do it. I was quite swift on my feet. But after being tackled a couple of times, and I hit back.
I know, that's right.
Luckily, I got kind of earmarked by this. There was this lady and husband team that coached for Zimbabwean judo, who also taught at our school. She saw that, she liked my fire, and then she said, "Okay, I saw you. You think you can fight? Get on the mat." Then she paired me up with one of the guys who was my year group. He had been training a lot longer than me, but just with sheer aggression and just tenacity. He threw me a couple of times, but I kept going. When he got tired, I started getting in on him, you know. And then she said, "You know what? This guy's not gonna quit. Right? You got a spot in the on the team." And that's how I got out of the rugby and got into the judo. Okay. Continued on, started doing a bit of karate when I got a little bit older. In Zimbabwe as well, it was a form of Kyokushin that I was teaching, because Zimbabwe's liberation history is tied to much to do with communism in regards to because they couldn't really go to the capitalist kind of countries to seek help in regards to getting away what they would deem at that time during Rhodesia. During the Rhodesian time, there were different cluster of people. So the white minority at that time felt like the black majority who wanted to have the same rights as you were, because believe it or not, the same apartheid kind of regiment was kind of being enforced within Zimbabwe as well. So black people walking on pavements, it was like if you were trying to get a driver's license, it was an issue, all these type of things. So for them to be able to fight all of this, they would go into Korea, they went to China, and they would learn martial arts, martial tactics, the art of war. And we're talking back in the 60s and 70s, where these guys were kind of sending young Africans over to that part of the world, learning how to fight and basically bringing it back. Then they created a couple of guerrilla wings. So there was one Spear of the Nation and all these other different type of stuff that I'm fully aware of. Caused a bit of issues, I lost a lot of loved ones in regards to that as well. But the ethos of the warrior class and the clan that I come from, you know, I think it's something that is echoed across all warrior people. Like, you know, there's a glorious death. So if you go out dying for what you believe in, it's a marvelous thing. So they naturally encouraged me to pick up martial arts. There's a system of fighting. There's a method, you know. The man can always beat the beast. You know, this is what my grand uncles and all of them taught me. And when we're teaching hunting, they'll say, you know, we're not the biggest, we're not the fastest, but it's the ability to channel our mind, the ability to have an understanding and respect for the animal that you're hunting and the environment that you're living in. So these type of emphasis was something that was engraved into me quite early on. Right. So due to some political unrest and some other issues in Zimbabwe, I ended up migrating as an immigrant with the whole family. And it was only natural for me that being in a foreign place, you know, it was necessary for me to get a level of normality, to gravitate to things that made me feel whole again. So when I came, naturally, I started looking for martial arts places and different places to train. So in 2000, I started.
So now, wait a minute. So your journey has now taken you from Zimbabwe to to where you are pretty much now, or did you stop in the other places? Okay, so you're in I want to say London right now. Is that correct?
So I'm actually technically in Kent now.
Okay.
which is just outside London. But when I initially first came here, I've only been in Kent for about 2 years now, so I've just recently left London. So probably the guys that come up with class me as a Londoner. I kind of stick out in this lovely part of Kent, as you were. I'm very much a Londoner in that sense, and that's where a lot of my. When I came here, I would like to believe I was 17 by the time I came to the United Kingdom. So not quite a man, but I had solidified as many lessons as I could that would kind of set me on a certain trajectory. And with that, when I came here, like I said, I gravitated towards martial arts. Managed to get it to Wing Chun. That was the first art I could find locally. It was a really amazing place, but again, part and parcel of the nature of how we fight in the part of the world that we're from. We didn't have a lot of respect for, and I don't think it was a conscious thing. It was something born out of necessity. We didn't have a lot of respect or a lot of thought into, like, you're learning karate, you have to learn the lineage, you have to learn who the masters was. We just wanted to learn, if you know Mawashigeri, boom, as long as you can do it, you don't even care if you know the technique. Perfect form, technique, know where to place it. That was all we cared about. So when I came here, I had that same kind of mindset. Unfortunately, when I started learning from UK Wing Chun Association in Romsey under Master James Sinclair at the time, he started making me have a very fond appreciation in regards to understanding the lineage, understanding the structure of the system, that there was an important to this methodology that is found in traditional martial arts. After that, I did move from East London to South London. Met a very lovely Jamaican gentleman who, the brother, teach me everything I understand in regards to being in South London, because he said, like, yeah, brother, you can't be here speaking the Queen's English. You understand? You stick out, So I quickly, every time I'll be speaking in a certain way when I first came from Zimbabwe, because like the way they educate us, the way we have to speak English, we have to have a certain command of the English language as a country that was colonized by England at that point. So I remember at that point in South London, the guy was like, yo, brother, that will get you stuck up real quick here. You have to learn. So every time I'll be trying to say something, then they'll be trying to say, no, brother, no, don't say it like that. And then they'll be ironing me out. And then over the years and years living with them, then I've just ended up having this bizarre blend of an accent where if I'm in South London, I'm a South Londoner. If I'm in another part, if I'm in East London, because when I first landed here, I was in East London, I speak like an East London person. But if I'm around people from Zimbabwe, South Africa, like that, my accent changes, which I suppose is a survival thing.
And it's an environment thing as well. The more that you're around a certain area, the more that you pick up the language, the more you pick up the sound of the people and connect with it. It is what it is.
Yeah. And it was a beautiful journey, because when that part of South London that I moved to, I don't know if you guys know about stuff like NFs and all these different like EDLs and all these type of things, which is basically, so I've grown to mature and understand it differently, but at that stage of my development, it seemed like our European neighbors at that point felt a threat of having these black communities there, which was, I felt like, a part of what happens in regards to the melting pot. So normally, like in London, where at some point the people, where if you talk about Bethnal Green, all these type of places, when you start going further back in time, before the Windrush, it was predominantly white. And over a period of time, there was a slow injection of black people, and then you have a spark of the riots in Notting Hill. Then later on, there was the Brixton riot, then there was Tottenham riots, all these type of things. And I feel like a lot of that was born due to these two different cultures trying to mix, where one culture was feeling a little bit threatened by the other. And I've come in, I've immersed myself. I got my best friend, my best buddy, Mr. Barnard, who taught me Thai boxing and kickboxing. I'm learning. And I really, in Zimbabwe as well, Bob Marley came over then, independence. to come to did an amazing concert for us and everything else. So we got a great affinity with the Caribbean islands, as it were, and our black brothers and sisters all around the world. It's something that we get heavily taught within Zimbabwe. So we learn a lot about Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, in regards to the development of the black civil rights movement, the development of the politics within Jamaica and the different Caribbean islands. It was something that was very heavy on our curriculum as well. So we were quite knowledgeable and conscious in that sense. So when I came here, it was something that, not forgetting as part of Zimbabwe as well, my mum being of South African descent, it's something that we're very conscious because of apartheid. And apartheid stopped when I was about 12, 13,
yeah,
so
about 14, 12.
Of what was happening, you know. And we had our own political issues within, there's a lot of tribal issues within Zimbabwe, which have slowly started ironing out because a lot of the kids who are there now are not fully aware of the issues that were there around the time, like my granddad and my grandma was around. And there was certain little blending issues. So there was many reasons I had to be really good at fighting, because I look like people from my mum's side, which is kind of like some of the issues I have even growing a beard. This is like some of the things that we have, which is kind of like a bushman mark trait. They don't really predominantly grow a full beard. So, so people would see me and they spot me, and then they just automatically would from one side, a particular tribe. But I spent more time on my father's tribe, and like I said, my people on my father's side are like these dark velvet, muscly, 6'3", 6'4" men. So I'm walking around there, and they can tell they're looking at me, and for them, you earn your stripes with the ability to kind of be able to protect yourself. If you can fight, whether irrespective if you're black or white, you know, we got what we call coloreds, which are mixed race people back home. If you can hold your own.
I said like myself.
Exactly. You know what I mean? So you would fit in like, you know, like my the moment you get there, they'll absolutely think you're a colored. And say, oh, the exit. They just start talking to you that way. You go, whoa, slow down, that type of thing. But as long as you're able to stand your own ground, there's that level of respect that you earn, and I had to earn my respect that way. So that level of indoctrination, or not indoctrination, that introduction into violence.
So just, you know, a quick story, I'm guessing I'm going to ask you. Like, what was probably one of the scariest moments where you had to defend yourself in a situation out there?
So some of the stuff started from when I was quite young, and I don't see that scar if it's proper visible. But there was, yeah, right over here. So when I was about 14, I was turning 15. There was this there's this peculiar thing that happened. So where my dad's sister lives, my aunt in Zimbabwe, she lives at the border, you know, by a place called Adbeni and Arcadia. And Arcadia is predominantly a lot of mixed race people live there, and they became their own, almost like their own race and their own culture, not of their own doing, but because of apartheid was a very terrible thing, I tell you. You know, like it's something that I think people don't like to talk about it to allow people to move on, but as part of the healing, I always think that it's necessary for these things to be addressed. But they used to take, so I don't know if I'll just give you a brief on apartheid. It was illegal for a black and white person to have a relationship. So if a mixed race person like yourself was found, what they would do, the government would take you and then they would put you into a monastery with nuns, separate you from the family, and put you in another country. So at that time, Rhodesia and South Africa had parts of it that were basically the same thing. So you had Northern Rhodesia, Southern Rhodesia, Nyasaland, and South Africa, which kind of like all operated as one. So if something like that happened in South Africa, they would take you, separate you from your mum and your dad, put your dad probably get a fine, your mum would be put in jail, depending which one's black, which one's white, and then you'd be put in a completely different country, right?
Oh, man.
It was vicious. Vicious. Yeah, and if you watch Trevor Noah, he jokes about it. And he talks about, you know, like I was born a crime, you know, I felt like a bag of weed. People used to drop me and pick me up. He manages to make the humor out of it, what makes him, you know, great comedian, managed to turn pain into something that we can all appreciate. But it was quite dark in that sense. So, but because of that in Zimbabwe, because of this system, the colored who were brought into Zimbabwe ended up basically being seen by the white politicians who had kind of annexed themselves away from Europe, right? Because believe it or not, Rhodesia at some point was sanctioned by the United Kingdom, said like, look, you're on your own, we don't want anything to do with you. So this was a unique group of white people.
Okay.
Yeah, so they were like a unique group of white people. They were tough. You know, these guys were coming out, they were farming, they were working hard. Some of them were descendants from quite a long time ago. Obviously not as long as my ancestors, but you know, they were in their stripes, they've been in there in the sun. And these coloreds now had to survive in this environment. They weren't quite white, but the whites were quite happy to give them a better job than they were willing to give the African. And this created friction between the native blacks with the coloreds, which put these coloreds in a very precarious position because you are both of these people. So instead of picking a side, they pick themselves. So you would find like one of my good friends, my kungfu brother, Alan, you know, he goes by Mad Mantis. His mum is mixed and his dad is mixed. So when you actually go to find the original black descendant, you know, as your ancestor for him, you have to kind of go a couple of steps back. And that's the same with the white ancestors, because it's a mixed race person with 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 a mixed race person. Right. They become their own gene pool, so to speak. So I was minding my own business. I was quite young at the time, and must have seen a young lady there, you know, at this place. She was really friendly. I was really shy, 14, saw her. She waved at me. I waved. I thought, oh, that's really weird. You know, a girl waving at me. At that age, I didn't really know girls. All I cared was about fighting. That's the genuine truth. And some of the colored guys who were there, who were her brothers, I didn't even realize, had posted up in a different position. I didn't see him. Who were in to me, basically, you know, speaking to their sister, who I believe was actually older than me. But then they were like, oh, why are you talking to our stir? You know, it became this, and it was like, it was a level of violence that escalated and that changed me a lot. Because at that point, the discussion is happening. I'm trying to kind of, what would be the word? I'm trying to de-escalate the situation, but because I will use the word de-escalate because I don't know any other word. I didn't know this terminology at that time, but all I knew is that things are happening really fast. They're really, I don't know why. I just said hi to this girl and they're wound up, and I'm like,
are you talking to this person about that? Yeah.
And it's happening, and I'm on the slippery slope. I haven't recognized it's happening. They surrounded me. This guy got me to got to my blind spot. I'm talking to these two guys. I can kind of hear my cousins coming from quite a distance shouting something.
Like, run, man, run.
My cousins are trying to, you know, they're agitated about something. And I'm trying to say, but oh no, it's okay. And I remember the last thing I heard was like a whistling sound, right?
So
and then it's only after playing it back, after the event, my cousins had to come drag me out because I just started swinging for the hills. So basically what happened, they had like a short pole. And when they swung, it was hollow.
Oh, man.
Imagine when you swing, you hear like... So that's the last thing I heard, and the flash. And ever since I was a kid, I remember from boxing, I've always been afraid to get knocked out, right? It's something that it's like drowning. I feel like something's going, so I just really start going hammers and tongs, really. And I remember these guys, you know, going all over the place. My cousins and people were holding on to me, for dear life. At that point, I was quite a strong kid because I was doing boxing regularly. I was doing judo, I was doing karate, I was lifting, shifting weight. I worked on a farm, so physically I was a specimen. You know, so it was not an easy thing. But I also
by anything. Gotcha.
I also didn't know how to navigate that situation. So I snapped, you know, and I was trying to do that move. I had blood pouring all over my face. It it was so the colored O's ended up fleeing because my spirit, I just became a raging animal at that point, you know. And it's only when my senses started coming back, you know, like you do everything like that, and then and then it was that pure animal mode at that point. And I remember feeling really angry and also really scared, knowing that that level of rage and that level of power can be in a person. And I remember, like, honestly, it was the desire to murder those guys. I really, really wanted to hurt them. I felt violated. You know, I was, and they're older than me, and I'm thinking, I trusted you guys. I was trying to explain to you, and you exploited that, you know, and I was quite young. And I think that was a dark turning to regards at that particular stage and how I started addressing my journey in martial arts, because it became the desire to really want to hurt people. Because I've been thinking, if you're cool, we're cool, but if you cross that line, that's it. If we're gonna, it's whoever's last standing. If I die, I die. You know, it was just that. That's what it was.
Yeah, understood. And it's like in like the sport aspect of martial arts, you have to have a different mind. I mean, like being able to compete, and you have to have a level of ferocity, but you also have to have a level of good-naturedness. Whereas when you're out in the street, like when something happens to you, your mind goes into the fight or flight aspect, but the fight aspect is like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to survive. So it's just, you know, I mean, like it's a different world. It's definitely a different world. And yeah, I've had those moments myself where it was just, you know, you see red, and no matter what you do, it's like you've got to get through as deeply and as quickly as possible. Man, you have gone through a whole lot, my friend.
Yeah, well, that, you know, I was a baby then, and for me personally, that me seeking my journey in martial arts was, I knew that as men we've got something very dark in us, you know, like lions, you know, something very wild. And I knew if that thing in me is like a flame, if it goes untamed. I remember my dad and my granddad used to say to me repeatedly, you know, fire makes a great servant, but it's a very bad master. So if you leave fire to go do its own thing, it will burn everything in its path. But if you use it to serve you, you can use it for cooking, you can use it for all these great things. So my dad would always tell me that, bring it in, rein it in, don't let it get ahead of you. You know, and like as a kid, I used to get so annoyed. I would start trembling. I'd feel my bones, everything. My blood pressure would go up. I'd feel hot. I would have to go. I would, you know, I'd have to hit. At that point, I'd made my own bag back home. I'd go and I'd smash the bag. And I had the opposite problem, right? I had the opposite problem in regards to, if you watch someone like Melvin Manoff, for example, and you can see that level of rage. It wasn't quite like,
not UFC fighter, but I want to say Pride fighter at one point in time.
K1, all that stuff, the good stuff.
Yeah.
And I see that, because once I get into that thing, just similar like when you see, that's why Mike Tyson scares me, because I see something that's nice. When I see him, just before he goes in the weigh-in and he's looking, he's thinking, do you really, really want to hurt me? He's looking. You know, you can see, it's like, and that when a man has the ability to tap into that part of his being, that is a dangerous person. You know, because
absolutely true. I want to say, even in his last fight when he did the League of Champions match with Roy Jones, I want to say it was like by the end of the fight, and like, you know, they're going and having the interview or such and such, and they go over to Roy and they're like, "Oh, Roy, I see, you know, he kind of hurt you and blah 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 blah," and such stuff. And Mike snapped. Mike was like, "What about me? How come nobody talk about how I got hurt?" And such. And like, his level of craziness just went out there. Yeah, Tyson is like when he switches to that other side of himself, like yeah, like that's an untamed, like an uncontrollable force, like or at least a force of nature in some ways, I'll say. Mhm.
Yeah, and you know, in my journey of martial arts, I've learned that everyone has that. You know, everyone has that, depending with your environment and the need and the desire that is required of you. You know,
Mhm.
it brings it more to the forefront more than others. Others, it depending if you come from an environment where it's extremely strict, it doesn't really serve you. Naturally, you it becomes more suppressed. You come across like this really timid person, and you find different ways to deal with it. Or if you're just absolutely wired that way, you know, like Mike Tyson talks about. Uh, I've listened to his audio book. I've watched a couple of his documentaries and stuff like that, and I
Mhm.
absolutely vibe with it. I absolutely vibe with it because when I watch it, it's because it's relatable. It's real.
You know, he says even himself, like if you've ever seen his podcast show on YouTube, the Hotboxing show, like if certain people come on to his show and they think they're tough, he has a way of just showing how crazy. And it's like, you really ain't that tough. You haven't seen the things I've seen. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's dark like that.
Well, it's kind of like if you know you got two alpha dogs. They come in the park, and if they're both very insecure dogs, right? A secure dog in its own are well trained, calm, disciplined. It knows to walk in a place, keep channeled, focused, doesn't get distracted. But if it's quite an insecure dog, it's been hurt, it's been through some things. Um, it feels like everything's a threat, so it's working in a very heightened state of alertness. You know, I see with a lot of my friends who are ex-military and a lot of high like security guys who have done a bit of security for over 20 plus years, and then you get to see that when you're in some really rough situations,
Mhm.
if you get defined by those situations, what ends up happening is they're just wired the whole time. You know, we go into a place to drink, to sit down. Someone looks at us the wrong way. I already, he says, like, oh, you see that guy's watching us. And then I have to talk him down, like, look, let's, you know. And that's why I'm very fortunate where the development of in my journey has allowed me to be able to harness that energy instead of
Yeah.
being a slave to it, you know.
Let me get back to just asking you a couple quick more questions because you know time has actually escaped with all the little malfunctions and whatnot. But so in your journey right now, as you are more or less a private teacher, of the martial arts and whatnot. What do you impart with your students as far as good rituals and I guess a healthy mindset? Like, what do you give them as far as philosophies to take on their journey in life?
Um, what I tend to do is, and that's the benefit of teaching private and opposed to teaching a class,
Right.
is that I look at the individual and I allow them to create a model based upon who they are. Opposed
Mm,
to, so if you went to Shaolin, you then start picking up. If you're in a Shaolin temple, they start teaching you to do Buddhist approaches in regards to development of the spirituality, right? It's you don't have to be Buddhist, right? For
right.
you to do Shaolin Kung Fu, right? But it's just something that comes part and parcel of that teaching. So what I do allow for personal thing, I always encourage them, whatever form of spirituality or spiritual practice that they do, that they need to keep it up because it's quite important to have your spiritual cleansing, growth, and understanding in regards to your maturity. In regards to the physical practice, just like anything, if you've got a high energy dog, you need to spend that energy. So I also encourage them to also do like high energy techniques, also rehabilitation exercises at the core, because when you're young, you think you're invincible. So you can just go
Oh yeah,
smash.
I got a yoga channel directly based to just keep it flexible and keep it healthy in the older age.
Yeah.
Totally get that.
So like I'm not too far in age from David Goggins, and he's talking about that way he spends about 2 to 3 hours stretching. Don't know how he got that far. There you go, the level of importance around it. If you look at yoga, you can invest that level of energy in regards to stretching and your development. But yeah, so for me, important is regards to being true to yourself and creating a model around who you are. I do really enjoy a lot of the psychology of people like Dr. Jordan Peterson, Carl Jung, that like where you kind of more focus holistically. So if you look at people like Carl Jung, he went to go live what the Maasai lived like, what the Native Indians look like, and going back to center of who you are and having a firm grasp of what makes you, so that to me is always quite an important thing in regards to that. So I always try to, if someone's like quite high energetic and they need to burn energy, hunger, for example, or if someone really like to think and they like the idea of the mechanics of things, a bit of Wing Chun, you can do a bit of trapping and all that type of stuff. I don't ever really think that one is over another, but if some people like to, the whole spiritual journey aspect of it, Silat is a good way to go. Some of the people who enjoy the real physical things, you consider yourself quite tough, Shui Jiao in judo, you quickly find that, that burns a lot of energy. And then you got the people who are just quite simply just like smashing things. That's when the Thai boxing and the boxing comes into things. So depending who you are, how you want to develop, it is catered more to the individual, opposed to, which is oddly the way not oddly, but incidentally the way my teacher taught me. I wanted to learn Tai Chi from him initially. And he said, I'm looking at you. No. What? I want to learn Tai Chi. Yeah. And then he said, no.
Like, you're going to learn Tai Chi, right? You won't hear with it.
It was all over the place. My mind was so it wasn't great for my personal development. So he knew a lot better. I wasn't mature enough at that point. So he helped me with that guidance, and which has helped me to develop as a teacher myself to understand when I meet a student, depending on their age, like when I teach new centers and individuals, I have a firmer grasp and understanding. It's like, all right, cool, let's get to know each other. When I get to know them, and then it helps me in regards to how I help them their development. If learning Qigong or Nei Gung, loads of Nei Gung exercises. I teach Qigong as a standard, but there's different levels to it, right? So some people I'll go heavier with the Nei Gung and Qigong exercises, whereas some I'll go heavier with the physical, hard Qigong and, that type of development. I've got some people who enjoy fighting, and I enroll them so they can get into fighting. We go to Troxy and we go to some of these blue-collar fighting and different competitions within the BCCMA. So depending with the person's development and growth, where do they want to go?
Yeah, I understand that. All right. Any other, I guess, thoughts or, let me ask you, any particular books that you found very, very useful in your, transition in life? So as you're now about 40 years old or whatnot, what type of books do you like to read? And do you have any particular books that our audience would tell our audience to invest in?
So right now, there's a book I am really enjoying. It's called What Everybody Is Saying. It's a bit of a psychological book in regards to understanding and the reading of body language, right? So you have a firmer grasp of understanding of what certain body responses we have to each other. We live in a society where I feel like we're all completely switched off. And one thing martial arts taught me above everything else is that if you have the right level of awareness, you don't even have to get away. You can get away and navigate without actually hitting anyone or actually using a technique, because once you have that level of understanding, you become sensitive to energy, your surrounding, and everything that's happening. You become a better human ambassador. We become a little bit more sensitive with reading each other. If you're like in a relationship, your missus says something and you don't like it, and you raise your eyebrow, or you do a certain physical body language, if she picks up on it, she can address it. And likewise, if we don't know how to navigate it, you just think the other person's got an attitude, and you end up in arguments, and then it's a slippery slope. So then, this particular book, what everybody's saying, I wish I could remember the author's name, but I'll quickly look it up. That this particular book allows you to be able to have a level of understanding. It's like, for me, it's serving me well, especially when I'm on the tube and on the train and dealing with daily life, you know. It just teaches us to love each other a little bit more, be a little bit kinder. You don't know what another person's going through. And it just helps us to navigate each other in a very difficult time, where I feel like society is teaching us to be quite chaotic. You know, we live in a very fast, just all about me. I don't care what you're going through. I don't care if you're tired. You can read someone's body language. You can see, oh, that person's tired. He's leaning on something. He's behaving. He might be hurt. He might be in discomfort, or he's had a hard time. You know, and just simply ask someone, oh, you're all right. You know, goes a very long way. You know, and if you get an unprovoked response, it's, oh, sorry, just checking that you're okay. 9 times out of 10, my personal experience is that the person goes like, oh, sorry, you know, it's nothing to do with you. Just really having a hard time. No, it's cool, brother. Just want to make sure you're okay. He walks away with a positive human experience, and then he's going to share that energy now. It's going to have a knock-on effect, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's like a better masculine trait, to be able to, you know, be humble enough and like just aware enough, really, to, you know, when you go by people, to be able to speak to them and be able to say, hey, bud, how's it going? And blah, blah, blah. If you see someone that's deep in their consciousness, you know, give them a smile and be like, hey, you know what I mean? Is everything all right? Or whatever, you know what I mean? But feel it, you know what I mean? I think, and, you know, as you had mentioned earlier, like, most people aren't into their own feelings. Like, they don't have that instinctiveness to tell that someone may need help, or someone may need to be spoken with, you know, in a situation, or, you know, whatever it may be. If we do these things more as a society and as the masculine presence in society, then I think that helps to guide our youth a bit more, and to help them to make better decisions in their connections with people. I'm hoping we can do this again very soon. I do have to get ready to cut this kind of short, but you know, one more note on the whole colonization, I guess. Because you know, this is really a whole. It's going to take a bit more unpacking than trying to do it in about 5 minutes or whatnot. But so you are from Zimbabwe, and do you miss like, do you ever feel as though you would want to go back, or do you miss being out there? Do you miss the memories that you shared in that area?
I recently went back in, well, the last time I was back was 2019.
Okay, so that was not long ago. Beautiful.
Yeah, and I do my best to make sure, because I still got a lot of family back out there. But those visits have taught me a lot of things, is that, you know, if you don't move on and understand that time evolves, stagnate, if you stagnate, you die. When I went back, a lot of the things, a lot of the people, my loved ones and stuff like that, all different family members, actually, they've passed on. So when I go there, I tend to be visiting resting places of my dad's sisters and brothers, and it's something that we have to have, you know, blessings for, that I've managed to even reach this point, because some of the kids who I went to school with haven't made it this far, you know. So you just have a certain level of appreciation for life, and I do miss it. But it's also really weird that I had to have this weird conflict, that the memory of what I loved about Zimbabwe at that time in my age was of colonial influence. So I've had to learn to re-fall in love with and relearn. I'm fully immersed in African history, dude. Like, I'm really, really learning a lot about my ancestors and the history. As I take on what the Europeans captured as a snapshot in regards to their books and everything else. So, for example, in Zimbabwe, the national, or what if you Google it, what language do they speak in Zimbabwe? It will say Shona, for example. But it's much more complex than that. It's more beautiful and varied. You know, there's a tapestry of different tribes, if you'd like to call it. So you've got people who are from Manyika land, you've got people from Chipinge, you've got people from the northern parts, the Korekore people, who are my dad's people, my mom's Ndau, you know, from the Shangani people. Then you've got the Manyika people, you've got the Karanga, you've got Kalanga people, you've got Bebele people living within the same physical realm, but they'll say Shona people as if it's just one language, whereas it's an amalgamation of all these different people with amazing histories, things to be proud of. But they've just kind of been put in one massive melting pot. It's similar like when I was learning about the Comanche people in America, right? I read these couple of books, and you know, if you're lucky, you might know one native Indian tribe, you know, but there was a mass of them with different things, with different levels of appreciation. They brought so many different things to the table. And I feel like that's one horrible thing that colonization done in an attempt for Europe trying to understand the African landscape, which is extremely complex. At any one point, they never sat down with all the leaders of all these different tribes. They never sat down with the Korekores. They never sat down with the Zurus, with the Ndaus, with the Manikas, you know, with the Ndebele people. You know, they never sat down with these people. They sat down with the people who, some of the Zimbabweans are a bit unkind, but my brothers can be a bit unkind. They'll say, oh yeah, they're sellouts. They're the ones who wrote those books. You know, they'll have that mindset. But some of the people were just genuine people. They enjoyed learning. They loved sharing their knowledge. So they shared it, you know. So some of the stuff looks skeptically at, but what I do is I look at all of it. I liaise with as many elders from different tribes and different people. I mean, I love all of it. I love absolutely all of it and everything that makes us African. And that's the beauty of what being Bantu is. I accept being Bantu over being Shona any day, because that's who we are. The tapestry, these are the people, our ancestors, they moved from the Horn of Africa down to Lake Tanganyika. Tanganyika means, in my native tongue, it means the start of the world, Tanganyika, which is interesting, the place where they found the earliest remnants of human remains. And then they moved down to the southern hemisphere. So there's so much beauty and understanding, and some of the pictures that they took during Great Zimbabwe shows the people doing cupping methods that is found in China. They found tapestry of things in China, and it's kind of like, you know, by going back, it makes me realize we think we're going forward, but it seems like we're regressing. You know, so there's so much knowledge for us in our past. You know,
like I think that's our biggest foundation of wealth is just being able to pull from our history and to be able to look at things in a brighter light and how we've evolved throughout the years and throughout time. And to really, and I mean, being an American, living in America, the one thing that I guess, you know, a majority of, you know, Black youth, even including myself, you know, has not had the opportunity to have its like understanding of its own language. Like my ancestors are Nigerian, and for me to speak Nigerian, you know, I mean, I don't have that tongue. I don't have that thing. I'm starting to learn it now because in school that wasn't taught. In school we had Italian, Spanish, and French. You know what I mean? That's all we had. But now, because of the internet, I can now take a Nigerian class and learn how to speak Nigerian, and you know, Afrikaans and Portuguese. I mean, whatever. It's a beautiful thing.
I'm curious. So, which one in Nigeria would you identify more with? Fulani people, or is it the Igbo tribe or the Yoruba?
Bro, I'm just learning, my friend. So I recently did my heritage, and my heritage's earliest, I guess, ancestry was Nigeria and Kenya, and I was like, okay. So I'm still digging into the exact whereabouts of things, but.
So, dude, time when you're free. I've really done a lot of work around that. I'll show you a couple of sites where you can kind of use it. JetMatch is a really good site. Because if you then really look at places like My Heritage, they only got like certain formulas for genome for certain countries. So when you kick it in the other ones on JetMatch, it allows you to then make a cross comparison. Kenya, a lot of people put Kenya when they're talking and expressing about Eastern Bantu people, right? Because when you start try to understand that in regards to the way colonization works, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. You know what I mean? So if you take it down, because I actually did a My Heritage thing, and it gave me some results. So I ended up doing some stuff with Ancestry in the end, which started making a little bit more sense. And then I've been about 10 years in the game of understanding the Ancestry game and unraveling my own DNA, understanding. That's why I said, like, even from a DNA perspective, I'm Bantu. I've got Western Bantu in me, Eastern Bantu, and Southern Bantu DNA, which is more a reflection of the African landscape, if you would. Showing the journey path of where the people came from. Western Bantu being, my Western Bantu comes from Cameroon. And the Fulani people, because the Fulani people traveled, but today Fulani people are classed as Nigerian. They're fair-skinned, don't have soft-textured hair, and they would mix with the Ethiopian and Sudanese people. So they look not your, bog standard Yoruba-looking kind of people. The Igbo people got certain kind of look, So you got all different. There's a beautiful tapestry that is there. But yeah, man, we should kick it at some point, man. And
yeah. Well, I mean, after this, we'll dig a little deeper on a more private level. But yeah, let's get ready to close out the show. Is there any things you want to tell the audience, or any of your own viewers that may be watching in or getting a chance to look at this?
Yeah, no, just like my personal thing is like everyone, man. Just like all the people that I've seen who've logged on, who I do know, they're all about that health and wealth, and I just want them to keep it up, keep up the positivity and energy. And for your viewers as well, like if they keep up the energy, life's a choice. Don't get sucked into illusion. Don't believe every thought you think of. And remember, discipline is freedom. And so you start one time, just keep working at it. You may fall, but guess what? Press the reset button. I've done it so many times. People may think, oh yeah, you know what you're doing now, or when I do a particular thing.
Every day is a new day.
I'm still working. So as long as everyone just wakes up and trying, and we keep working, it's a beautiful journey as long as you keep trying and just embrace all of it,
I love that, brother. Well, my Kung Fu brother, peace. This has been a wonderful talk, and yeah, we'll continue on very, very shortly. We'll probably get to a part 2 in about a month or 2 or whatever, but yeah. All right, so to everyone else out there, you guys, thanks for tuning in, and we'll be talking with you guys soon. Take it easy.